I'd appreciate if you'd take a moment to give me your thoughts about the previous year on the Lutheran Cartographer, what you liked and what could be improved. If you could go to lutherancartographer.com/2020 survey, I'd appreciate it. Let's get into the show. The Lutheran Cartographer, episode 55. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. Today we're going to Gretna, Louisiana to talk to Pastor Larry Beane. He is the pastor of Salem Lutheran Church there in Gretna. Pastor Beane, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nicholas.
Tell us, where exactly are we geographically? Most people know Louisiana and New Orleans, but help orient those that might not be as familiar with the Southeast.
Sure. Gretna's really, we border up against New Orleans, actually. We're a small city. We're not a suburb, but we're a small city. We're right next to New Orleans. It's a historic city. We're on the west bank of the Mississippi River, which is kind of geographically challenging to describe because even though it's called the West Bank, to get there you have to drive due east across the river. So you drive east to get to the West Bank, and it's called the West Bank, but we're actually due south of the city. So it makes no sense at all, but that's just typical of the New Orleans area. We're kind of in our own category. Actually, the New Orleans area, we are very, very far south. I don't think a lot of people realize just how far south we are. So like, for instance, most people think of southern Mississippi as pretty far south, but for me to get to the southernmost point in Mississippi, I have to drive due north across the longest bridge in the world to get there. So we're really, really far south. We're like 32 degrees latitude, so we're only 9 degrees north of the tropics. So we are definitely in the deep south. And again, we are kind of we are part of New Orleans in the sense of culturally, architecturally, and all of that, but we're a completely different governmental jurisdiction. So we have kind of it feels like New Orleans, but we also have that kind of small town feel to it as well.
I see. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What's your background and how did you come to Gretna?
Well, I grew up actually up north near Akron, Ohio, and my first real job out of school, I went to upstate New York, to Schenectady, New York, out over near Albany, and I worked there for a few months, and then they sent me down to White Plains, New York, which is down near New York City. I did computers. I was an IT guy for about 12 years before I went to seminary. So from there, I mean, because of work, I kind of jumped around. I was a consultant. So I lived in Philadelphia for about 5 years. And then we got married, and my wife and I moved to Atlanta. We lived in Atlanta for a very brief time. And then I went to seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I was there for 3 years. And then I did a delayed vicarage in Columbia, South Carolina, which we loved. It was a wonderful, wonderful place. And then my first call was in 2004 in the New Orleans area, and we've been here ever since.
Fantastic. So you've lived in many, many different places. How would you contrast where you are now in New Orleans with your time in South Carolina, with Fort Wayne, and with your time up north?
Yeah, most of my life has been, as I said, lived in the north and contended with snow and ice and those big storms in the winter. And the big difference here, it is such a warm, subtropical, lush, it's like a paradise, especially me because I hate shoveling snow, and the worst thing to me was like scraping windshields. I never have to do that ever, never ever. We get snow, we get a dusting of snow maybe once every 5 years, maybe. And I remember at our school we had a little rinky-dink little snowstorm, and it's like school stopped. The parents, the teachers and the kids were all outside taking pictures, because we got like an eighth of an inch of snow. So the climate is very different. The plants and animals are different. I mean, we have alligators. You can go see alligators just a few minutes from here. We're surrounded by palm trees. We have lizards all over, our yard and our house. I have a little tiny house and a little yard, but I've got several citrus trees. I've got orange trees growing right outside my window. I can reach out my bedroom window and pluck an orange. We had banana trees, which sounds cool, but they're not. They're weeds. They're a pest. They're just horrible. They get like 30, 40 feet high, and you can't kill them. Fortunately, my next door neighbor's a landscape guy, and he's managed to get rid of them, but they're horrible. But the culture here is wonderful. I mean, the people are so friendly. It's really familial. When you've lived here for a while, you become part of everyone's extended family. Um, when I first moved here, it was explained to me that we're not really we're not really an American we're not really an American city, and we're not really even a Southern city. We're more of a Caribbean city, and that's very true. I found that very true to be culturally speaking. We're very much like the Caribbean. It is very, very different than other places I've lived. It's unique. It really is. And my wife and I have gone completely native. We absolutely love it here.
All right, great. So tell us a little bit more about that Caribbean atmosphere. Many people might not know what that means in terms of what the day-to-day, how it changes kind of the day-to-day life, the relationships. You've already talked about that familial aspect. What other parts would you highlight for our listeners who are trying to get their minds around what exactly does that mean?
Well, for instance, because of the nature of the way New Orleans was settled, it's you know we the area has been under many different flags. We were French, we were Spanish, we were English, we were American. We've got a strong black culture, a Creole culture, a Cajun culture, and it's like it all kind of comes together in this sort of metropolitan gumbo pot, this mix. And it's sort of like you get to experience the best of everyone's culture. And fortunately, we don't really have, especially in Gretna, where we're a smaller city. People have grown up side by side for generations. In our city, we don't have racial and ethnic strife. Everybody kind of gets along, and we just sort of look at each other as kind of one people that have lots of different branches in the family tree. Of course, the food is awesome. I mean, people come from all over the world to eat here, and the stuff that when if we have a potluck at church or if we get together with friends, the kind of food that we eat it's normal for us, but it's exotic for most people. But it's just delightful. It's so unique, and the culture is very easygoing. I think because it gets so hot here, you know, especially in the summer. It is so hot. So it's in that sense, it's like a lazy southern town where, we're just not in a big hurry to get stuff done. But we routinely get together with our neighbors. We walk around, we go hang out, and someone will say, "Hey, Reverend Beane, come on up and have a beer with us." And we just do. We just kind of hang out, and it really is kind of, in a sense, it's kind of like Mayberry, but only with gumbo and jambalaya and crawfish and stuff like that.
That sounds really fantastic. Let's come at this from a little bit of a different angle. You've already started to do this, but say more about what you would say are the best things about Gretna.
Well, again, we live in a place where people go when they go on vacation, so we're we're kind of surrounded by it's almost like the culture, the environment, the food. It's almost like being on vacation all the time in a way. Of course, we have to work. That's the only part that's not like being on vacation. But the proximity to other things like we can drive 10 minutes and we're in the swamp. We're in the bayou. Literally surrounded by cypress trees and alligators. Or you can drive 10 minutes another direction and you're in downtown New Orleans. Um, you know, it's and it's very neighborhood oriented too. So, I live in what's called Old Gretna. It's a historic old neighborhood, but a few minutes drive and you're in a different neighborhood. The city of New Orleans is like a patchwork itself of various different kinds of neighborhoods with different cultures. But there's a lot of civic activities here. There's always something to do. Of course, COVID has kind of taken that away from us this year. But under normal circumstances, I mean, there's always a festival. There's some kind of music festival. There's some kind of food festival. There's some kind of activity going on, and it's really more of an excuse to get together with your neighbors and your family members. Most people around here are related to each other, and even though we're not, when you're clergy, you're always kind of an outsider, typically, unless you serve where you grew up. But they've embraced us as part of their own families. I mean, in a very literal sense, we're just considered part of the family. We have things, and that's like I mentioned, Mardi Gras is another example where entire neighborhoods get together and just have fun and enjoy one another's company. So I think culturally speaking, the really the best part is that sense of belonging. Nobody's an outsider. Nobody is excluded. We just get together with everybody, and it means everybody. You have kind of eccentric characters, and you just don't bat an eye at it. Everyone just sort of gets along, and it's a very laissez-faire kind of hey, let's get together and have a good time, and people do take care of each other too. When there's a tragedy, or when we go through something like a hurricane together, people roll up their sleeves and help each other out. Culturally speaking, that's not always the case in every place that I've lived. I find that that is just a unique. It's unique to this area, at least in my experience.
That makes sense. So now let's talk about the flip side. What are some of the most challenging things about being in Gretna?
Well, for me and for my family, the one difficulty is our distance from family. Travel is expensive, and my dad lives in Ohio. My wife's family is from Ottawa, Canada. When we lived up north, we saw family a lot. We drove. We would go and see family very often, but now we hardly ever do. Um, the real challenging thing, and really the only downside that I can really think of to living here, is the hurricanes. Hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th. The really bad part of it, where there's a lot, it's very stressful, and we really have to prepare and be ready to evacuate at any time, is really August and September. That's really the high point of the season, when the Gulf waters are the hottest. A category one, nobody bats an eye. A category one hurricane, Category two, we start to raise an eyebrow. But if we see a three or a fours coming, we get nervous, especially since Hurricane Katrina, which we went through with only a year after we moved here. So the hurricane season, it's funny when you live here. Everybody knows like the terminology. It's like we're all like amateur meteorologists, and we have apps on our phone to track hurricanes, and that we wait eagerly for the next update from the National Hurricane Center. You get an update every 3 hours when there's one in the Gulf, and we're looking at the cone, and did it shift, 2 miles to the east or 2 miles to the west, and then everybody speculates where the storm is going to hit. So it's that can be very stressful, and if you do have to evacuate, especially if you have animals, it's tough. It's a difficult thing. We had an active season this year. We actually got a direct hit from a category two pretty about a month ago. Really, it was pretty late in the season. And we were in the eye wall, which was really wild. We've never experienced that before. We had a hurricane. The winds were coming east to west, and then it stopped. And all the neighbors, we all went outside at the same time and looked up at the sky. It was blue, and we knew the rest was coming. But we went and hung out and checked on our neighbors. How y'all doing? How you make out? Everything good? And then we felt the wind start from the west, and we all hunkered down, battened down the hatches for the next round. But Yeah, like I said, though, we kind of we just accept that as part of our life. That's just something that we live with, and we try to take care of each other as best we can. And where I live specifically, my house is a historic little shotgun house. It's very small, but it's solid wood. There's no studs. It's cypress wood, so it's my house has been here well over 100 years. It's been through all the big hurricanes, and so we're pretty safe, at least in our house.
Fantastic. Let's go back to Katrina for just a moment. At this point, it's been, I guess, 15 years,
15 years,
which
yes.
is remarkable to me because it had such a big impression on me at the time. Is there still, does Katrina still affect the day to day, or not the day to day, but are the effects of Katrina still seen, or is the city pretty much healed from that particular hurricane at this point?
There are a few areas of the city that really did not come back, but they're very few. Just certain neighborhoods that, for many years after the storm, you would see houses that were still in a state of disrepair with the paint on them. The authorities would come through and paint a big X on the house when they examined it, and they would spray paint how many people dead that they found or what have you. And for a long time, for many years, you would still see that, and you would see water lines, when the where the water was on buildings and houses. But it's really life pretty much after about 5 years, everything pretty much got back to normal. I'd say the biggest thing are the long-term changes. Like my own church, we had a school, and we had a pretty large turnout of people in church. But after the storm, after Katrina in particular, a lot of people just said, you know what, this is just too much. We're gonna head up north of the lake, or we're gonna look for drier ground. And so we did lose a lot of families, a lot of people over the course of years, because you have to find a job, you got to find a house and whatnot. People didn't just like leave all at once, but our church became much smaller. We had to close our parochial school. So those kind of effects were, kind of permanent and life changing, although they weren't. It wasn't sudden. It was kind of a shift,
Hmm.
and we're still living the effects of it. And psychologically, I think people are now starting to calm down a little, but right after Katrina, as soon as if there was a tropical disturbance off the coast of Africa, people were panicking. They're saying, "Oh my gosh, we got to start." They really did. They kind of overreacted in a way, because before Katrina, people said, "We're not leaving." We went through Camille and Betsy. We're not leaving. And then when Katrina happened, a lot of people said we should have left. So, but it, like you said, it's now been 15 years, and I think we've reached more of a state of balance now. But our emergency systems are much better coordinated now. I mean, they learned a lot of lessons at Katrina. So, our various levels of government and police and EMTs and fire companies, we all communicate better with each other now. We have much better plans for evacuation. They really did fix the levee system that was broken in the city, and so it's much better now. So it's sort of like there were a lot of lessons learned in a way, but as far as the negative effects of the hurricanes, those are pretty much we've outlasted them, I guess is a good way to put it.
That's good. Let's go on and talk about what it's like to be Lutheran there. You've mentioned this Creole culture that's not quite Southeastern, but it's its own thing. How does Lutheranism fit into that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mostly in the deep South, we call it the Bible Belt or the Baptist Belt, but we're not part of that. Again, we're kind of this island of. It's a unique, culturally unique area. We are heavily Roman Catholic, and in fact, the Roman Catholic ethos is so strong here. I thought this was amusing. We had an LCMS youth gathering in New Orleans, and the poster for the LCMS youth gathering featured the Roman Catholic Cathedral in downtown New Orleans, St. Louis Cathedral. I mean, it's so iconic. St. Louis Cathedral is such an iconic image of New Orleans that you can't escape it. So people around here are overwhelmingly Roman Catholic. They identify, when they meet each other, what parish are you from? Where did you go to high school? Because everybody went to a Roman Catholic high school pretty much. And so being a Lutheran here, in a sense, it's kind of good because especially we're a liturgical congregation, and people are, if they visit our church or if they come, I do have some people who have come over from the Roman Catholic Church. They are comfortable here because it's the same liturgy. We're kind of a high church congregation, I guess, by comparison with other LCMS churches, but we're very liturgical and traditional, and so Roman Catholics. It's sometimes they'll visit and they'll say, "Well, y'all are more Catholic than we are," you know. And I had a funeral one time for a wonderful, beloved member. He was 93 years old. We all called him Uncle Buddy. I don't think I learned his real name until after he died, but we called him Uncle Buddy. And his son actually became a Roman Catholic priest. And so at his funeral, we had some Roman Catholic clergy who were visiting, and they were just they were delighted at our liturgy. They kind of whispered to me, "I wish our liturgy looked like yours," because of course the Lutheran liturgy is the more of the old-fashioned Catholic liturgy, as opposed to the Vatican II kind of liturgy. So we um, it's really good in that sense. It's also challenging for evangelism because even people who are quote unquote unchurched, they identify as Roman Catholic because their grandma was a Roman Catholic, or their mother or father, or they were baptized as a Roman Catholic and they never set foot in a church. But you see, they identify so strongly with that, and it's a cultural thing. It's like, well, I went to, I went to Brother Martin High School, or I went to Dominican High School, and even if they never set foot in church or never really practice the faith, they see themselves as culturally Catholic, and that precludes them from becoming Lutherans in most cases, even if they would, even if they kind of believe what we believe more so than Catholicism. So that's a real challenge. But one thing that's nice for me is there's a great respect for the clergy. So if I'm wearing my clerical collar, people are very friendly. I know that's probably a different experience in your part of the country, but in our part of the country, it's really nice. People will come up to me on the street and ask me to pray for them, or ask for a blessing. Um, and like for instance, I serve as our fire chaplain. We have two fire chaplains, myself and the Roman Catholic priest. We get along great. We serve together for the David Crockett Volunteer Fire Company. We're the oldest volunteer company, oldest continuously active volunteer fire company in the nation. We've been on duty since July 1st, 1841. We've never been off duty since then, throughout wars, hurricanes, everything. And but I mean, I've been serving as fire chaplain for 10 years. This coming year will be my 10th year. And again, they know I'm a Lutheran pastor, but they see the collar. They understand that we're very, very close, historically, and in some ways theologically. I'm treated very, very well by people in our community. Like I said, they just really rallied around us, as even though my wife and I weren't born here, we don't have a pedigree here, but they feel a sense that we are sort of. Sometimes it's almost like I'm Gretna's pastor, because I'll walk down the street, people honk at me, they wave at me. I mean, there's a sense of genuine love towards me and my wife, my family, because of that connection with the church. So it's a paradox. We're not Roman Catholic, but they see us almost as part of the Roman Catholic Church in a way.
Sort of you're the parish priest kind of thing.
In a sense, yeah, in a sense, and they understand the like I said, the historical closeness, the theological areas where we have agreement, and they don't see me as an outsider at all. But so it's an interesting place to be a Lutheran pastor, and it's an interesting place for our congregation as well.
I
I
s-
mean, our congregation has been there since 1871, and
wow.
same location. I mean, we have different build. We have a nine. Our this is the third building, the 1950 building, but historically speaking, Gretna was founded by Germans, and so we have, a lot. We have our church, Salem Lutheran Church, and St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church are sort of the pillars of the Christian community, historically speaking, in Gretna. So there's a lot of gravitas that's associated with our parish.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to ask you about something from a different part of the country. When I interviewed Pastor Rojas, he's in Orlando, he mentioned that it seemed to him like there was a lot kind of with the, um, I guess you would call it the sort of more southern kind of tropical kind of live and let live, that there was at least in the Roman Catholic churches around him in Florida, it seemed like there was a lot of kind of liturgical and theological decay. It sounds like New Orleans is just a completely different thing, and that you don't see that as much in your area. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think that's a fair reading. I've been to St. Joseph's, which is, I mean, I actually probably live a little bit closer. I'm a block and a half from my church. Maybe I'm 2 blocks from St. Joseph's, a walk. Um, and for instance, St. Joseph's has a carol on, and they're constantly playing hymns. It's awesome, and it's really cool because in October they play "A Mighty Fortress" on the carillon quite often. Um, but like I said, I'm friends with the priest there. He's a very faithful guy. The congregation loves him. And occasionally I have to go to a funeral or some function at St. Joseph's Catholic Church, and they're liturgically pretty good. I mean, it's not a Tridentine Latin Mass community, but they do incorporate some Latin here and there in the service. The service is very traditional, and it's so you don't have at least in Gretna, in our small community. It's somewhat a very conservative traditional community. You don't have a lot of sort of nonsense going on liturgically. It's just your sort of traditional Roman Catholic mass, and so I think that's accurate. I think the experience, if you were I know I'm friends with people who are Catholics in the South, and it is a challenge for them in the same sense that it's kind of a challenge for a lot of Lutherans in the Deep South. But again, my situation is different because I'm surrounded more by Roman Catholics than Protestants than evangelicals.
I see. Let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. Thank you so much for a great 2020 and for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. It's been a great year. I've learned a lot of things about podcasting, and I'm sure you have some feedback for me as well, good and bad. I would appreciate it if you take a few moments of your time to go to lutherancartographer.com/2020 survey to let me know what you liked and what you didn't. And be sure and vote for your favorite episode as well. Thank you. Again, that's lutherancartographer.com/2020 survey. Thank you again. All right, so now let's go on and talk about what it's like to raise a family there. What's been your experience, your congregation's experience about how it is to raise a family?
It really is wonderful, especially here in Gretna itself. One of the things that does contrast with New Orleans, we have almost zero crime here, which is especially in the historic section that I live in. I'm kind of a night owl, so if I live a block and a half from the church, and if I want to go at midnight and pick up a book from my office, I just have to go get that book because I'm writing something. I think absolutely nothing of it. I just go out the front door, I walk. You can walk anywhere at night. Like I said, the police station is just up the road. The fire company's just up the road. It's a very safe environment in that sense. And so children are not there. There's some children in our neighborhood, and they play with each other and they run around, they everyone knows them. So it's a great place to be a kid. And like I said, it's very safe, so parents are, feel a sense of security. um, it's and again, it's a very traditional kind of, in terms of morals and ethics, it's a very traditional Christian environment here. Like our city still has a nativity. We just a couple days ago we had a living nativity, and one of the area pastors, was actually a Baptist pastor, um, narrated and read from the scriptures, and there were hymns. Our annual tree lighting, usually Father Gary, my friend, the Roman Catholic priest, he borrows a mitre from the archdiocese and he portrays St. Nicholas. And one of the councilman's wives reads the Christmas account from Luke's gospel. And so it's like openly Christian. I'm just waiting for the ACLU to step in and start bullying us. But our the ethos here is overwhelmingly Christian, and it's very traditional in terms of values, in terms of, again, crime is just not tolerated here. We have wonderful police. And it's just it's like in a sense, like a small town, an island, sort of an island of a small town feel, even though architecturally, culturally, linguistically, everything screams New Orleans when you walk around. It just looks like we're part of New Orleans. But unfortunately, the city of New Orleans has grown very violent, and crime is out of control, and the infrastructure is really terrible. Driving in the city of New Orleans is a challenge because the streets literally look like the moon. But it's different. Like I said, here in Gretna, we have a more sense of responsibility to our neighborhoods, and our government feels a sense of responsibility here, and it translates to a much more family friendly environment to grow up in.
So it sounds like then Gretna is quite different in terms of what you can expect than New Orleans itself then.
Well, that's a little bit, that would be a little bit an overstatement, I think, in the sense that New Orleans itself is a patchwork of neighborhoods. So I don't know everything about every neighborhood in the city. I drove Uber for a few years, and so I've seen a good bit of the city, and most of it, to be honest with you, I just wouldn't want to live there. It wouldn't be safe. I know there are places that there are, though. There are places, I have friends who live in the city. They love it. And it used to be a lot better to raise a family. I have had parishioners who grew up in the French Quarter, like when they were kids. They lived there. It wasn't touristy the way it is now. It was actually a vibrant neighborhood where people did grow up, and people did raise families there. So, but speaking what I know, just from being here now, I've lived in Gretna since '07, and I've been a pastor here since '05. I got my call to serve at Salem in '05, and it's just a tremendous place for children to grow up. And what's nice too is they tend not to move away. You have generations of people here. I joke about it because my congregation, what I could probably do is draw a family tree and show where everybody in the congregation, except for me and my wife, everybody in the congregation is related. Everybody comes from the same sort of stock families that moved to Gretna in the 1800s, and there's a real sense of belonging. But like I said, it even, if somebody moves here from the outside, they're not excluded. It's like, oh, y'all become you're part of the family now too. It's really cool. I love that aspect of living here.
That is really great. What are the educational options for parents that don't want to go and use the government schools?
Yes, this is a big deal here because, unfortunately, Louisiana and Mississippi are perennially in a competition to see who can be in last place in
Oh
terms
no.
of public schools. So, um, now this is one area where the Roman Catholic identity of this area is really strongly felt because I think the statistic is it's more than 50% of people in the New Orleans area send their children to parochial or private schools because the public schools are just not, they're failing. They're just not very good. I mean, they're making some efforts with some charter schools and things, but they're just not very good. And so there's a strong parochial school emphasis. Um, Although, like I said, our parochial school, we had to close it. I know some of the Catholic schools had to close after Katrina as well. That was very traumatic, by the way. They had to close some churches, in fact. But the way things have kind of settled out, the Roman Catholic parochial school system is very strong. We do have some private schools. There are some Protestant schools as well. We do have a Lutheran school in the area, which is kind of a weird hybrid leftover. It was a church. It was a church that was a spinoff of my congregation many years ago, and then they left during the Seminex controversy. So there's a Lutheran school over there on the other. It's on the West Bank, but it's not in Gretna. But it's a kind of a joint ELCA LCMS operation, which is a very strange, very strange thing, but it's kind of just a leftover from the way the history worked out. So educationally, it is kind of a challenge, and it's something that people have to budget for. Especially the Catholic schools, they're not cheap. I'll tell you, and people really, it does cause, a lot. Mostly mothers have to work to pay the tuitions. The high schools are very, very expensive, but the Roman Catholic high schools have a wonderful reputation. But the public schools they're a real challenge for people that can't afford private education.
I see. Let's go on and talk about what you would do if you had a friend coming into town and you said, you got to go check out these things, whether it's restaurants, things to do. What would you highlight if a visitor is coming into town?
Oh, and we love to do this, by the way. So if anybody's listening to this podcast, if you want to go on vacation, you want to come visit us, please come and visit us. We love having visitors. We've had Lutherans from all over the country come and visit us. We've had, a lot of my colleagues and classmates and their families and parishioners have come, and sometimes we have parishioners that'll put them up for the night. We've had visitors from Russia come and several times and stay. But so we love to show people around, and I mean, there's just a lot to do and see. Our city of Gretna, we have a farmers market every Saturday, just like 2 blocks from my house. Again, and about the same distance, we have our German American Cultural Center and Museum. It's this magnificent little museum for German heritage. There's also like a genealogy center there where people can go and do genealogical research. We've got our old firehouse just a few blocks from here, walking distance from the old firehouse. It was the David Crockett Fire Company, and it has our old pumper, which is a horse-drawn, steam-operated fire apparatus. There's very few of them left in the country, and it's from the 1870s era. And this one has been here all that time. And so it's over there. You can go see it. We have a historical complex with old historical buildings with a working blacksmith shop. I mean, we have classes. Like if you want to learn to be a blacksmith, you can take classes. They're free. You can just show up and learn how to do it. We have a really vibrant historical society. A lot of people, I tell them, well, I'm going to the historical society meeting, and people roll their eyes. It just sounds boring, but we'll have like well over 100 people attending our historical society. There's always food, there's always drinks, it's just fun and joy, and it's really awesome. In September or October, we have an annual Heritage Festival, which it's a funny name, but it's really a music festival. They're like downtown Gretna transforms very quickly. It gets cordoned off, and there are 7 stages along all over the historic part of Gretna, and you have about 100,000 people come to our city. for that weekend. We have great music at the historical at the Heritage Fest. We have I got to see Joe Cocker before he died. I mean, it was really cool. I was like almost right on the stage, and I got to see Joe Cocker. You know, Leonard Skinner, Charlie Daniels, Chicago, Starship, all these big headliners, and then lots of local music, local talent, carnival rides and booths and with food, and it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. I mean, we didn't get to do it this year, of course. We're hoping for next year. But just the day to day aspect of living in Gretna, we've got great restaurants here. Of course, we have that cultural spillover from New Orleans. We've got two really magnificent Thai restaurants. We've got a vibrant Vietnamese community in the area, so we have great Vietnamese food if you like pho and that kind of thing. We've got like a just across the street. I've got this rolled ice cream place. We've got um, pubs, you know, like neighborhood pubs where you can get really good Louisiana food. So we're never hungry. You know, we're never at a loss. Our downtown has been re, uh, re revitalized, and you know, you can like we can walk over to the levee and watch the sunset on the Mississippi River, and you can see the city of New Orleans on the river. And people they go biking on the levee. They go running, walking. We have an amphitheater. You just hang out and everybody knows everybody, so it's really cool. It's really safe. You know, if you want to go to New Orleans, we're a 10-minute drive to the National World War II Museum downtown. I can get in my car in 10 minutes. I'm there. You can see anything you want to see in the city, and our World War II museum is really magnificent. It's like the third best museum in the country. It's right up there with the Smithsonian's. So it's just one of those things you have to go see at some point in your life. Go to the World War II museum in New Orleans. And I mentioned we have a lot of state parks. If you want to get away from the city, you know, just a few minute drive, you're on the bayou. You can take an airboat ride. You can see 8 foot alligators. You know, it's just it's there's when the only problem when we have visitors come and see us is we run out of stuff to do and we run out of time and we tell them, oh, you got to come back now. You know, we've got so much more stuff that we want to show you. But it really is. We do, and one thing is like we do have a tradition of hospitality. So when people do visit, we show them a good time. We make sure they're well fed, and we just enjoy company of other people, especially when other Lutherans come to see us, because we really feel like we're one big family. Especially you know in the LCMS, it's a small world in the LCMS, and you know I know your pastor, and he knows me, and I know you know typically when someone visits, I oftentimes do know their pastor, and we have you know family members that know each other. People went to school together, so so consider this an invitation, y'all. If you want to come, have a good time, and hang out with us. Maybe after all the COVID stuff, if it does go away, there'll be a lot to do and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to back up to something you said earlier. And I understand that this is somewhat akin to asking someone what their favorite hymn is, but if you had to if you had to say like one or two like particular restaurants to go to, what would you say?
We just went to this Thai restaurant. It's actually a converted house. It's an old shotgun house that they converted into this restaurant, and it was so good. It's called Thai De Jing, and like it's nestled in the neighborhood. It's just surrounded by houses, and you can walk to it. You can drive if you want. And you know, in fact, one of our friends in the community was working as a waitress there. We didn't know she was working there, but the food is just. I mean, it's like gourmet level food, and it's not real expensive. It's just outstanding. Also, we have I'm trying to think of the what I would highly recommend. If you like pizza, believe it or not, we have a fantastic pizza restaurant. It's actually run by a Vietnamese family. They're like a family of genius restaurateurs, and it's called Huey P's, named after our controversial governor Huey P. Long, because Huey P. Long Avenue runs up and down. It's like the main street in the city of Gretna, and so that's That is, you can get any kind of pizza that you want, and of course they have lots of drinks that go along with that. It's just a very fun, informal place, but the quality of the food is just beyond belief. And there are many others as well. There's a Gattuso's, which is a little neighborhood pub that we go to quite often, and the food is just you wouldn't expect it to be so good because it's not a dive by any means. It's a nice place, but it's a small neighborhood, a very small neighborhood place. But the food is just really, really good. It's authentic Louisiana fare, and so there's a lot of them. So I could go on, but I think I would identify those as sort of what I would kind of highlight right now.
Fantastic. Thank you for highlighting those for us. Before we get into our closing questions, I want to ask you about a recent article that you wrote for Gottesdienst. One of my friends and a listener of this show forwarded me your article where you were talking about the need for courage and manliness as we face our current day. Elaborate a little bit more about that and tell us a little bit about what you think we should be looking for in terms of going forward at this point.
Yeah, this is so important. Just in the 16 years I've served in the ministry, we've seen tremendous cultural changes and challenges, and really it all comes down to the family. And we really need men to step up and be the leaders of their family, the spiritual leaders, the cultural leaders. We really need young men to learn how to be comfortable in their manhood, how to step into the boots and take leadership of the family. It's I'm 56 years old. I'm almost 57, and the cultural difference between someone my age and a man who's 30 years old is it's a chasm. I mean, it's a gulf. The constant berating of masculinity is it's a very bad thing. It's a very unhealthy thing for our families because strong men who are good leaders are ultimately they are going to be very gentle with their children. They're going to be, they're going to take care of their wife in the way that of meeting all of her needs in the family. And strong families means a strong country. It means a strong church, and that burden of leadership really falls, scripturally speaking and psychologically speaking, anthropologically speaking. A lot of that falls on the shoulder of the husband and of the father of the man, and that formation I think begins, for young men. It begins with the way we raise our sons. It begins with how we treat our young men in the church. It's really, really important that we try to get young men engaged at a younger age, to be leaders in the church and to be leaders in society. And it kind of runs contrary to the culture because it is countercultural because the emphasis is on girl power and making girls leaders. And look, and that's of course we want strong girls as well, but not at the expense of our young men, because God has given us unique vocations within family life, and I think we're living in a time that there's a concerted effort to bring chaos to that and to try to blur those lines and to try to we want our girls to be boys and our boys to be girls, and we want everybody to just sort of be the same, and that's not how it works. God created us with these differences, that men bring something to the table, women bring something to the table, and that synergy of male and female working together as God designed them to work, there is such power in that, and such power to heal our culture, uh, to um, to heal our country, to bring people together, and to live life as it was meant to be lived. A lot of that potentiality is built into the roles that we have as men and women. So I think it's really, really something that we've got to pay more attention to.
Definitely. And thank you so much for elaborating more on that. I want to back up a bit and ask you about how we can go about doing this in our churches. And the reason I ask is, as you know, the orientation of the LCMS is conservative, but unfortunately, conservatism is often just not principled, but 40 years behind whatever the progressive wants to do right now. So, for example, 20s feminism, the feminism of suffrage, is taken for granted in our churches. And the 60s feminism of the sexual revolution, unfortunately, has its toehold as well. So, how can we go about, as in conservative churches that are conservative in the sense of that 20, 40, 60 years behind, how can we go about making those changes?
Yeah, you raise a good point because we seem to be fighting battles, looking backwards instead of being where we are right now.
Or even more than just fighting those battles, just accepting what has already come before that perhaps sowed the seeds for the bad things that we're seeing the fruits of now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. It's a huge challenge. We are in the world, but not of the world. But I really think it's a kind of a getting back to the fundamentals, back to the basics. When the basketball team is losing, the new coach comes in and he says, "Okay, we're going to focus on fundamentals," and the guys, have to do basic things like bounce passes with each other and stuff like that. So, really, what we need are fathers to lead devotions in your family. Like, learn how to do that. And you can, fathers can begin. It sounds daunting, but look, learn the table prayer and lead your family in the table prayer and just do that. Just do that. Start there. And then your family starts to see you as dad, as being, oh, well, this dad leads us in prayers. Dad should be the one making sure the family makes it to church. Dad should not be sleeping in, and mom has to bring all the kids to church. Dad is dropping the ball when that happens. What dad needs to do, dad needs to say, look, family, we go to church on Sunday. That's just what we do. Okay, so get dressed, get ready, and we're going to church. That's what we're going to do. And children should see their parents worshiping. They should come to the communion rail, and they should see mom and dad reverently receiving the Lord's Supper and seeing coming to church as a priority. It doesn't mean, oh, well, there's no football game today, so I guess we'll go to church. That children will pick up on that hypocrisy. They don't learn what you say; they learn what you do. And so I really think what we need to both parents, mothers and fathers, to lead their children, bring them to church. Um, Figure out how to do family devotions. They can, like I said, as simple as the morning prayer, Luther's morning prayer, Luther's evening prayer, the table prayer, um, and especially for dad to sort of take that leadership. That's one really basic thing. And I think also it's important that children learn that their being in church is, of course, we go to church to receive the gifts, but when you're in church, you're actually serving your neighbor as well. Because if you're not there, that's an empty spot in the pew. And we find our strength as Christians in the flock, seeing lots of people in the church singing together, vibrantly being there for one another. And so I think we need to develop more of a sense of the table of duties kind of approach. That, look, this is your vocation, whether you're a child, whether you're grown up. You need to come to worship. You need to be involved in the church. If there's something you can do to volunteer, and I think it's a very noble thing to get our daughters to say, "Hey, why don't you help the altar guild?" This is a noble and honorable feminine way of serving, and for our sons to serve as acolytes, for instance. When our boys see that, wearing some kind of a lacy white garment is not feminine, that's masculine. When they're with the pastor, he's got, like, you know what I mean. I think it's important for our young men to understand that the pastoral role is a masculine role, and they can assist in that in the chancel, wearing vestments with the pastor, praying with the pastor, helping to lead the service with the clergy. I think these are important things. And again, our culture is, we want girls to be acolytes. We want boys to not be up front. There's this cultural pressure
Yeah.
to downplay the masculine and to turn our little girls into boys. When I was on my vicarage, we had the congregation required all confirmands to serve as acolytes. And one year we had a boy and a girl who were our students. I was helping teach confirmation, and the little girl really did not want to put on the alb and go sit with the pastor for the service. She actually asked to be on the altar guild instead, and the pastor wouldn't let her do it because that's not how they did it there. And I thought that was, obviously I was a vicar at the time. It wasn't my place, but I'm not the vicar anymore. I'm a pastor now, and it is my place. That was wrong. There's nothing wrong with encouraging young women to embrace their femininity and the traditional roles associated with femininity. That's not shameful or wrong, and it's not shameful or wrong for a boy to aspire to serve, in a masculine role with the pastor, with the elders, with the clergy. We have got to get away from this idea of thinking that we have to think like the world. We don't. We're not the world. We are the church, and we embrace those vocations that God has given us, including the vocation of men and women and of boys and girls.
Absolutely. Now, before we start and ask our final questions, I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to point our listeners where you would like. Your church's website, places to follow you online. Where would you like to point our listeners?
We need to get a website. We don't actually have one. We have a Facebook page. It's Salem Lutheran Church LCMS Gretna or something like that. I mean, if you look for it on Facebook, you'll find it. But unfortunately, we don't update it a whole lot. We probably should. But what we really do need, and it's on my agenda. It's my list of things I need to do. We need to get a church website. It's just something that kind of fell through the cracks when our school closed. That element was that technology thing was handled by people on the school side of the ledger. We had a church and school website at that time, but since our school closed, we haven't had a website. So I would encourage you to you can look for us there. If you want to come and see us, like I said, you can find me on Facebook. You send me a message. We're also in the LCMS directory online. So if you're an LCMS member, you can go to the LCMS's website, or if you Google LCMS directories, and it'll pop up with a directory. Like you can plug in a city, and you can find contact information for churches and pastors. So people can do that as well. And I love getting texts and messages and phone calls from people. Like I said, we really love having visitors. It's a great joy for us to host visitors. Sometimes people come to New Orleans for a convention or a vacation or something, and they will pop in and visit with us. And we absolutely love when people are able to do that. So I wish I had a better answer for you. Maybe next time you bring me on, and I'll have a website for you.
Alrighty, sounds good. And you listeners, you can find links to all those things that Pastor Beane just mentioned, as well as all the wonderful things that he mentioned that you can check out if you're visiting. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/55. Pastor Beane, thank you for your time today. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, first of all, Nicholas, I want to thank you for not only this interview but for your series that you're doing. I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's really great for us as Lutherans to understand that we're all over the country, we're all over the world, and we should think of ourselves as family. So if you're out going out of town somewhere, look up the local Lutheran congregation, look up the local Lutheran pastor. Try to go to church if you can when you're on vacation. And what I've found a lot of times is, if you do that, you might even, instead of staying in a hotel, you might stay with some fellow Lutherans. A family might host you, and I think we really do need to explore that level of hospitality that we should have with each other. And I know there's actually a Lutheran B&B, like an Airbnb knockoff. There's a Lutheran B&B out there. You can Google it and find it, and they kind of operate by internet and word of mouth and that sort of thing. But I think what you're doing is an awesome thing, and I really do encourage people come visit us. We have parishioners who have put people up us, and when health allows, when we have people who are healthy and able to host visitors. We oftentimes do. Sometimes people come and stay. They want to stay in a hotel in the French Quarter, but they come and visit us or hang out. We encourage people to do that, and also to go all over the country and find your fellow Lutherans. And it's also really important for the sake of our young people. We want our Lutheran young men and young women to marry each other and stay within the faith. So I think those relationships are really, really important now more than ever. And so I think your idea of running this podcast is really a big part of how we can facilitate those relationships and those introductions.
Absolutely. Thank you again. God's peace.
You too, Nicholas. Thank you. Peace be with you.
Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, including a link to Pastor Beane's article that we discussed near the end of the podcast, find all that good stuff at lutherancartographer.com/55. You'll find the show notes there. I want to encourage you to take a moment and fill out the survey on 2020 and the Lutheran Cartographer. It's always helpful to me to hear feedback, good and bad, as to what you liked and what you think could be improved, as well as vote on your favorite episode of the year. You can find all that at lutherancartographer.com/2020 survey. Please take a moment to fill that out for me. And make sure that you're subscribed to the show. You can do that on your app that you use to listen to the show, or on iTunes or on Stitcher. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any episodes like this one. Thanks again for listening. I'm Nicholas Weber. I'll talk to you soon.